The definition of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the murder of approximately 6 million Jewish men, women, and children by Nazi Germany and its collaborators during World War II. Through working with the Holocaust Educational Trust, I've found that just looking at raw statistics doesn't fully help you understand the magnitude of the Holocaust, but by actually speaking to people who have experienced it, it's a lot more eye-opening.
Many people think that the hatred towards the Jews started during the Holocaust. However, we have to go back hundreds of years to find the real roots of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism began in the medieval ages, from the persecution from the Romans. Hatred of Jews came from the blame of Jesus' death, as well as supposed black magic, and other propaganda rumours were made up to spread the hatred against Jews. Jews were made to do unpopular work such as tax collecting, hence the stereotype that Jews were greedy and always wanted to have lots of money, whereas they were actually instead forced to do this job. Laws were made which removed the Jews' rights to live wherever they wanted, and they began to be segregated, and they were expected to convert into the majority religions such as Christianity. Darwin's book created theories that Aryan whites were the top race and Jews were a different race, a minority. Even the Russians under Tsar Nicholas II attacked the Jews, claiming that they had plans to take over the country in a revolution. During my time working with Lessons from Outsource Online, we learned about pre-war Jewish life. This was very important in understanding how Jews lived before the war and the Holocaust. Jewish life was relatively happy, and Jews lived in their own communities and with other communities. This managed to paint the picture of how bad the Holocaust was, because it showed you how Jews were living and prospering before the Holocaust.
Before the outbreak of World War II, many communities were mixed with Jewish communities, and for the most part they got on very well. For example, the town of Oswiecim in Poland had a population of 14,000, of which 8,500 were Jewish. The rest were Christian, and they all got on very well. They respected each other's religions, and they took part in each other's festivals. In Oswiecim, there was a place called the Great Synagogue, which was the center of Jewish life and worship there. People came to socialize there, and actually it was the first building in Oswiecim to have electrical power. It was between two Christian churches as well, which showed how much Christian community respected the Jewish community there. But once Nazi Germany invaded Poland, they took Oswiecim and turned it into what we now know as Auschwitz-Birkenau.
So who were the perpetrators of the Holocaust? Well, many people think it was just the Nazis that made the Holocaust happen, but there was also a whole host of collaborators that had to exist for the Holocaust to happen. Albert Gensmüller was a collaborator. A collaborator is someone who didn't directly kill people during the Holocaust, but couldn't have happened without them. Albert Gensmüller was responsible for the rail system which transported Jews in freight trains for cheapness. 400 Jews could be up in a carriage, and they even had to pay for their own carriage. It was often long journeys with no food, rest, or toilet breaks. There's also bystanders, and bystanders are people like citizens who know the Holocaust is happening, or soldiers, but choose to do nothing about it. The soldiers who were in place in these concentration camps as guards or perpetrators, and they had a choice. They did not have to be at these places and could have been transferred if they wanted to.
Through working with Lessons from Auschwitz, we heard from multiple different survivors. One of those survivors was Stephen F. Frank, who was a Dutch Holocaust survivor. When he was younger, during the war, he got taken to a transit camp where he spent a large chunk of the war there. The interesting thing about Stephen Frank is that he didn't associate himself with being Jewish. Even on his identity card, it said that he didn't have a religion. But he was labeled to be Jewish because he had 4 Jewish family members, which does show how the Nazis didn't view the Jews as a religion, they just saw them as a race that had to be removed. During his time at the transit camp, one thing that he said, which really resonated deep with me, was that he was 8 years old and he was walking around the camp. He went too close to one of the walls, and there was some German guards there. And instead of just telling this little 8-year-old boy to go back, they pointed a rifle at him and set an Alsatian dog on him, which mauled him. And the guards laughed.
As part of the learning resources sent to me by Lessons from Outswitch, there was a book called Night by Eli Wiesel. Eli was a Holocaust survivor who spent a lot of the time of the Holocaust in a concentration camp. In the story, he goes back in his time there and the horrors he faced. Eli Wiesel famously said, "If you listen to a witness, you become a witness." And this shows that it's important that we cannot let the story of the Holocaust die.
It is important to teach about the Holocaust and to hear from survivors. But to really understand the magnitude of the Holocaust, it's very important to speak to actual survivors. And especially now, as we will be the last generation to hear their stories directly from them. By speaking to the survivors, it helps you really understand the different interpretations of what happened and each individual's story. It also helps to humanize the Holocaust. So rather than just reading words, it really helps to hear directly from someone who has experienced it. And the events of World War II and the Holocaust must be taught to future generations, as people have to be made aware of what the impact of one person can do.